Whether you're a new player to EU4 or you're an experienced Chat Lord Virgin Cave Dweller with over 10 million hours in EU4, I highly recommend you watch this fully because a lot of things have changed with the Domination DLC to the estates. Hundreds of new estates have been added. A few things have been changed around as well with the basic mechanics for the estates, and I'm pretty sure every one of you is going to learn at least one new thing from this video or a lot of new things from the video. So if you enjoyed the content, leave a like. If we get 5,000 likes in the first week, I'm gonna do a new army composition video explaining the new domination meta, since now we have a revamp for the unit pips as well and a lot of changes for the base combat mechanics. And if you haven't gotten the domination DLC yet, I recommend you use my link in the description to get it from my Nexus. I get a commission off of every purchase, and you will also be able to get the domination pre-order bonus if you use my link. And above all, guys, it would really support the channel massively and help me out making the videos that I absolutely love making for you guys. Also, boys, if you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. I'm trying to get to 170,000 subs by the end of April, which is really close, so I'm kind of losing hope on that, but at least a man's gotta try, right? Your entire country is divided between various factions, as well as the crownlands, which is the lands owned by the king, i.e. you. So you can see here, usually you start with around 30% or more or less crownlands, and the rest of the estates land is divided between the various estates. For the Austrians, we got 40% nobility, 20% clergy, 10% burghers. The Ottomans have a very different estate. We have the Umera, which is the nobility, the merchants guild, and the ulema, which is the clergy. But we also have the Dhimis, which represents the amount of people in the country that are not Muslims but live within the Ottoman borders, as well as we have the new Janissary estate added with the domination DLC alongside the crownlands. Take note, certain countries, like for example the Pope, have 50% crownlands instead of 30, and that's good because you're going to be using crownlands to give out really good privileges. Usually the good stuff costs crownlands, and also you want to have crownlands because the higher the amount of crownlands you have, the more bonuses you get. Like, look at this, we get 20% reform progress growth and 5 maximum absolutism. Once you reach 75% crownlands, you're going to be getting max absolutism plus 15, yearly absolutism plus 1, as well as autonomy change reduction and reform progress growth plus 60%. It steadily increases. There you go, we got 90% now, and it's went up to 80% reform progress growth, as well as autonomy change minus 0.025. And whenever you reach 100% crownlands, you're gonna get up to 100% reform progress growth, essentially doubling your reform progress growth, as well as autonomy 0.05 reduction monthly, which is a huge deal. The way that you gain crownlands is fairly easy. There's a few ways. First off, you gain passive crownlands from taking other provinces, as long as the targeted nation has higher crownlands than you have. So say for example we start with 0 crownlands and we take provinces from Hungary, it's gonna even out the difference between our crownlands and the Hungarian crownlands within those provinces. So we're gonna by default get more crownlands because we have none, right, or less than they have. Second, and the easiest way to get crownlands, is to develop lands. Every single time you develop a province, doesn't matter if it's diplo admin or military development, you will get 0.2% crownlands. So you get 1 crownlands for 5 dev clicks. And the third way is to just seize crownlands from the interactions here. We have 3 interactions: sell of titles, which gives us a flat amount of money, and we give 10% of our crownlands to the estates, which essentially gets divided between the various estates that we have. Summon the diet gives us an agenda where we get to choose between 3 separate missions we can fulfill for the estates that we have. If we have 5 estates like the Ottomans have, then we get 5 different missions here. So for example, the Janissaries want us to have 12 monthly mana points per month, military mana that is. So we just hire an advisor, there you go, and that means we just did the mission and gained 50 military points. The reason I'm showing this is because it's really easy to get a lot of benefits from your agenda. Every time you summon the diet, you gain 5 influence alongside 5 loyalty. Seizing crownlands is going to take 5% crownlands from the estates. If you have below 50% loyalty when you seize crownlands, then there's a chance that you will trigger a rebellion. So try to have above 50% loyalty whenever you do seize crownlands. Now that we got the basics out of the way, let's actually go go and discuss the actual privileges. As of the Domination DLC and patch 1.35, you can have 6 privileges from the very first day of the game. However, there are multiple national ideas, idea groups, and even government reforms that allow you to get more privileges maximum. So for example, Brandenburg here can have 1 extra maximum nobility privilege as their tier 2 government reform. This allows them to have 7 nobility privileges, and it gets even better. The new court ideas also offers you max privilege per estate plus 1. That means for all 3 or all 5 or all 1,000, doesn't matter how many estates you might have, will get 1 extra max privilege, as well as this particular idea lowers the max absolutism impact from privileges by 20%. I cannot stress enough how important it is to give out the plus 1 mana privilege from the very first day for all 3 of the estates. Why am I saying this? And I know I've said this in every video, and I've still seen people saying that this is not good because you lose all the crownlands. Well, I'm gonna exemplify so it's a lot easier for you guys to follow, right? So for example, we gave out all 3 of the plus 1 mana privilege, which means for the rest of the game, we're getting 1 of each mana points extra. We're getting right now +8, +8, +4 as the Austrians. We would have gotten +7, 7, and 3 otherwise if we didn't give out this privilege. And yes, indeed, we do have the crownlands modifiers here that are horrible. National tax, autonomy change, absolutism, liberty desire from subjects development. Well, realistically, once you summon the diet and you seize crownlands, this is lowered from the get-go. And not only that, but let's actually analyze this a little bit, okay? Max absolutism minus 30% is irrelevant because absolutism triggers in the 1600s. So it's not even, I don't even know why it's shown here, honestly. Liberty desire from subject development is not as bad as it seems. 100%, oh my god, must be horrible. No, it's not. Let me exemplify. I've tagged into France, and guess what? We have liberty desire from 100%. Oh no. But guess what? We have 5 vassals, and they're still freaking loyal. Most of them anyway. Orleans is a little bit disloyal as consequence. But that's easy to deal with. Just placate them a couple of times. Or just once apparently was enough. And there you go. They're back to 48%. We can also improve relations with them and so on. The point is that this is not such a big debuff as some people make it out to be. The only big debuff here is the monthly autonomy change plus 0.2. That is actually pretty bad. Now, if you are at peace, this translates into just 0.07 rather than 0.2 because you do have government rank and peace modifier as well to keep into account. But we will be able to get above 20% crownlands ridiculously fast, no matter what country we play as. Let's take, for example, the nation of We've given out the plus 1 mana privilege, and all of these debuffs here actually do not really affect us, but the simple fact that we only have 1 province. So as a 1 province nation, this is our capital, which means that we're not getting any autonomy. That is only for the capital city, not the entire state. Keep that in mind. So even though we're supposed to get 0.1 each month, we're getting 0 because it cannot be above 0 at any point in time. But that being said, if we want to expand, right, small nations have it easier. I.e., check this out. I've done a quick fake war with Ingolstadt here to illustrate my point. If we are to take 2 provinces from Ingolstadt, check out what happens. We're losing 2.9 clergy ownership, 2.9 nobility, and 4.7 burger ownership. So check out our estates. We got 5%. After we take these 2 provinces, we go from 5% to 15%. That's it. Just a single war. We take 2 provinces and we literally triple the amount of crownlands. Realistically speaking, it depends on the country where you're playing as, but you can definitely take 2-3 provinces as an OPM within the first 5 years of the campaign, and then after 5 years you seize this a second time and you will go up to 20% crownlands, plus you have the plus 1 mana privilege until the end of the campaign. This can be a little bit different for bigger nations, however. So say for example, as the Austrians, we're going to be taking some Venetian land. Whilst it does lower the clergy and nobility amount of crownlands, it does increase the burger lands, but this is also because the country that we just attacked, Venice, has higher amounts of burger ownership on their crownlands than they have nobility, clergy, and crownland ownership. So as consequence, obviously, we only go up to 9.5% crownlands after this war, meaning that as bigger countries, it would take 2 to 3 wars to get to 20% crownlands rather than 1 war as with smaller countries, but it's still worth it because those extra extra 3 mana points will help out so much throughout the campaign. Considering that mana is the most important resource in EU4, I strongly encourage you guys to give it out from the very first day. What if we start with less than 30% crownlands? Well, then we have to prioritize. For example, as the Livonians here, we only start with 20% crownlands. I strongly encourage you to give out the admin and the military mana points first, and then give out the third one afterwards, the Diplo one, but it is situational. It does depend on what exactly you need more of. If you need more Diplo points than military and admin, then prioritize the Diplo and the military, or the Diplo and the admin. It is up to you when it comes to that particular situation. A few more smaller things I want to mention are the fact that if you have really high influence for your estates, you will get less crownlands when you annex provinces in your wars. So try to have lower influence for the estates in order to get more crownlands from your wars, i.e. give out less privileges before your first war and give out the rest of the privileges after the first war if you want to do that. And yes, it is possible to lose crownlands if you attack a nation and you have 30% crownlands because you did not give the +1 mana privileges and you have high influence for the estates. Then yes, you will actually lose crownlands. So there's that as well to keep in mind. Now I realize I've talked a lot about kind of basic stuff. I hope you guys learned something from that though, and this video is probably going to drag on for a little bit longer, but bear with me. Now after we give the +1 mana privilege, the second privilege that with the domination DLC and 1.35 patch is absolutely mandatory for all 3 of the estates is this particular sequence here, the clerical education for the clergy, which can give, if you have above 60% influence, plus 25% reform progress growth, which is a huge amount. For the nobility, the grand court position does the same thing. Above 60% influence or above 30% influence gives 0.5 minus prestige decay or 1 full-on prestige decay. And don't worry, you likely will have very high influence the entirety of the game. And the third privilege for the burghers is the allow burgher economic freedom that will give you flat merchant trade power up to +10 and provincial trade power +50%. Guys, I cannot stress how important these privileges are. They buff up your nation massively. Just remember to have above 30% influence. Otherwise, right now, for example, we're getting, because we're below 30% influence, lowered provincial trade power, but that's easy to fix. Just give out the patronage of the arts, and we already fixed that. We have 30%. Same for the nobility. We're going to give out the increased levies that offers 10% loyalty equilibrium as well as 10% influence. Take note, you want to give out the increased levies, especially in countries that have really high amounts of nobility crownlands, because it scales the amount of manpower that you get with the amount of lands that the nobility have. So if your nobility has 0 to no lands, then don't give this out or revoke this privilege, because it's pretty much useless in that particular case. It's just wasting your privilege slot for no reason. One more privilege that I really encourage you guys to give out is the religious diplomats. It's been changed in the domination DLC. It gives +1 Diplo reputation, which is actually pretty good, and it lowered the amount of relations you get flat out with other nations of your particular religion, but it is worth it. So there you go. This is the Holy Trinity, 3 privileges for all 3 of the estates for your standard Western nation. This changes for other nations like the Muslims, the Indians, and so on. We'll go through that in the other part of this video. Just hold on. We haven't finished with these bad boys yet. Of course, when you have crownlands available, you should also give out the clergy land rights, the nobility, and the burgher land rights, because this gives +100 governing capacity. Very likely you will struggle with governing capacity, and you will need that. If you don't need governing capacity, sure, you don't need to give out that privilege, but if you do, just remember it's there and you can always give it out as long as you have the crownlands for it. There's other privileges that were standard before. Now I'm not so sure anymore. So for example, the -15% advisor cost reduction privilege for all 3 of the estates, Diplo, military, and admin, used to be standard, but because it got nerfed, it's only 15%. And remember, it still gives the same +10% stability cost modifier, which is pretty high. It can be worth it if you want to increase your loyalty equilibrium and if you want to have cheaper advisors and you have no other privilege you want to give at the time. But realistically, in the mid to late game, you want to start canceling this bad boy out, because you're going to be able to get really cheap advisors from the various monuments, from idea groups, from just events, and 50% cheaper advisors that you will likely be getting as you go along in the campaign. And instead of giving out those privileges, you can give something that's a lot better. But then again, like I said, it's kind of worth it in the early bit of the campaign when you don't have any specific privileges you can give out. There's a few other privileges similar to the clerical education that scale with the amount of influence, the right of donation that scales with loyalty, not influence. influence. Keep that in mind. Now, this bad boy, what it does is it can give you prestige per development from missionary and missionary maintenance cost up to 100%, meaning it can make your missionaries free. Plus, it enables the decision, make generous donation, where if you pay a certain amount of ducats, actually, I'm just going to illustrate. There you go. So we got this privilege, means we got the make generous donation. As long as we pay 52 ducats, we gain 10 loyalty. Take note, you can only do this every 10 years, so it can be worth giving out if you have the extra privilege slots available and you want to increase your loyalty for the clergy really fast. Say, for example, you want to cancel out a privilege and you don't have enough loyalty, because remember, in order to cancel privileges, you need to have more loyalty than you have influence for that particular estate. But right now we got 45 loyalty with 49 influence. We cannot cancel any privilege. Supremacy over the crown is a rather tricky situation because it gives plus 10 flat influence for all three of the estates, as well as it gives 10 loyalty equilibrium for all three of the estates. So it can be worth giving out in the early bit if you cannot reach 50% loyalty equilibrium with all three of the estates. But right now we're close to 50 loyalty equilibrium. What do I mean by loyalty equilibrium, by the way? You notice here that your loyalty, you have 45 and it says below equilibrium is 47. Essentially, your loyalty drifts towards your equilibrium. Eventually, it will stabilize once it reaches the same amount as the equilibrium. So if your equilibrium is 50 and you have 30 loyalty, you will, with time, reach 50 loyalty. Or vice versa. If you have 50 loyalty and your equilibrium is 30, it will keep going down every month until it reaches 30 loyalty. Now, this is influenced by a variety of things. The main one, of course, is the privileges. Some privileges will give loyalty. Some privileges will take away loyalty. So, for example, primacy of the nobility, the one we gave out, takes away 5% loyalty equilibrium. But it's not just privileges. You can also get loyalty equilibrium from idea sets. Even from national ideas, they can give you loyalty equilibrium. There you go. Court ideas, once more, gives all estate loyalty equilibrium plus 10%, as well as revoking privileges costs 5% less equilibrium, because yes, whenever you revoke privileges, it will cost you 20% loyalty. So if you have 50% loyalty, it will go down to 30% loyalty once you revoke that privilege. There's also reforms that can increase or decrease influence for estates. So for example, you can get 10% less influence if you go for curtail noble privileges, or 10% plus influence if you go for strengthen noble privileges. Then again, royal favoritism reduces the loyalty loss from seizing crownlands by 5%, as well as all estate influence modifier minus 5% as well. Then again, all estate loyalty equilibrium plus 5% if you go for the decentralized bureaucracy, and so on. It really depends. There's a lot of ways of increasing or decreasing your loyalty equilibrium. Another one that not many people know of is, for example, army tradition. Army tradition gives you up to 5% nobility loyalty equilibrium once you have 100% army tradition. Religious unity gives you 5% clergy loyalty equilibrium. And similarly, having 100% mercantilism, which I gave myself for the purpose of showing you, can give 10% burghers loyalty equilibrium. But take note, this is extremely expensive. So unless you're cheesing it with certain exploits that can be cheesed to get 100% mercantilism, it will take a while to get 100% mercantilism. That being said, when it comes to the burghers one, you can get another 5% loyalty equilibrium from naval tradition for your burghers. And overall, prestige can give up to 5% loyalty equilibrium for all three of the estates. Legitimacy gives only for the nobility 5% loyalty equilibrium as well. And the share of crownlands for the estates gives out some equilibrium as well. They got 5.7 loyalty for the clergy, 9.5 for the nobility, and 3.8 for the burghers, because it, you know, the nobility have more crownlands than the other two have. That also works for the influence. The amount of crownlands dictates the amount of influence. So we get 23% nobility influence, 14% clergy influence, and 9% burgher influence because of the distribution of land. You can have up to 3 bonuses for each of the estates also based on the influence and the loyalty of the estates. I gave them 100 loyalty and I got above 60% influence from the privileges, so I can show off what exactly they can give. For the clergy, you can get 20% national tax, 1 flat papal influence, and 10% stability cost modifier reduction, 20% manpower recovery and maintenance for your units, minus 10% from the nobility, and trade efficiency plus 20, as well as development cost reduction, minus 10%. Take note, you need to have above 60% influence as well, not just the loyalty, in order to get this maximum amount of benefits from the estates. And the extra privileges I gave out are the burgher financial demand. Now, the burgher financial demand gives you flat national tax plus 10%, but it also gives the ability to get 5% construction cost reduction and naval maintenance minus 5%. Take note though, if you do give this out and you go to your decision, so you're going to go ask for contribution, it will lower burgher loyalty by 10%, so keep that in mind. But it's worth giving this out early on in the game after you've unlocked the technologies that allow you to construct buildings, of course. Plus, tax modifier plus 10% in the early campaign is really worth it, since tax is going to be your primary source of income in the first few years of the campaign. Later down the line, you're going to switch to a mixture of production trade economy, but in the early bit, it's going to be predominantly tax. I also gave out the private trade fleets because it lowers the cost of building ships, light ships that is, as well as it increases the ship trade power. As pretty much 90% of countries, you want to primarily have a big trade fleet to help you in your trade nodes. But if you're a landlocked country or a country that doesn't really have too much access to a big naval node, such as the Venetian, the Genoese node, and so on, obviously it is not as worth it. So as Austria, it's not really that worth it to build a fleet at all, really. But as the Venetians, you want to have at least 60% of your ships trade ships, getting you more trade power in your main Venetian trade node. I also gave out the nobility right for Colta diet for the nobles, which gives us the ability to go to decisions once more, and we are going to get 15 loyalty, but we also gain 10 influence. So this might not be your cup of tea if you don't want to have increased influence for the nobility. Keep that in mind as well. Later on, once we unlock army tradition, we want to give out the army tradition DK minus 0.5 and the general cost minus 10%. It is a huge privilege. In fact, I would replace 100% nobility right for cold diet with this. A few of the newer privileges added, such as the expand the fortifications, can be okay in certain situations where you really want your forts and your ramparts to give you that extra bit of defensiveness and lowered fort maintenance and so on. But I really would give this out only as a last resort because it prevents you from seizing crownlands from the nobility. Alternatively, you could give this out if, say, you want to get rid of the burghers and the clergy crownlands. So you only want to have noble lands and crown lands because you want to keep the high noble lands, so you take advantage of the increased levies, ergo getting that extra manpower from the nobles. There's a similar privilege for the burghers and for the clergy as the one that I mentioned for the nobles. Institutionalized clergy is the one here, which gives 10% influence and 15% loyalty. There's also a religious delegation that offers you 10% clergy loyalty, 25 relations with the Pope, and automatically competes the estate agenda if it's a clergy agenda. This again is available for all three of the estates under various names and titles. Now, you probably noticed we already have 6 out of 6 privileges, and there's still more stuff that we want to give out. That's why the last ones that I mentioned are optional. I wouldn't necessarily give them out unless I really need to, but I hope that gives you a good overall idea of what your crownland should look like as a standard Western nation. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Ottomans because they have a lot of big changes too. Obviously, you have 5 estates rather than 3, but that being said, we're still going to give out the +1 mana privilege for all 3 of these. Essentially, we're giving the same holy trinity for the 3 main estates as we gave for the Austrians. It's always going to be the same. The rest of the stuff, the other 3 privileges afterwards, are the ones that differ from the first 3 privileges. One more thing I want to add before I talk about the Janissaries is that this privilege here, the Merchant Guild's crown possessions, can be very misleading. Now, it does give you trade range, which is decent, as well as global trade power based on the amount of crownlands that the burghers have, but it takes away 5% crownlands, and as you go along in the game, your burghers will likely have less and less crownlands, which makes it less and less worthy giving this privilege out, making it simply a waste of a privilege slot. It can be worth as a trade power early on in the campaign if you have a lot of burgher ownership of your crownlands, but you will still likely cancel it as you reach the 1550s or maybe even a little bit earlier. Now, when it comes to the Janissaries, the special new estate that the Ottomans have, of course, you want to flush them out with as many gifts, i.e. privileges, as possible, and that's why we're going to give out the Sultan appointed Agas that gives the leader shock and army tradition. Janissary celibacy is a must, especially if you yourself are a EU4 player, so you understand their cause. Standardized salaries to lower their salaries. Encourage discipline training, so you give them 5% discipline. Loyalty to the Sultanate, which increases their loyalty equilibrium by 25, which is a huge amount. as well as the strict Dervishini system that gives you manpower and defensiveness in every heathen province. So basically all of the Balkans from the get-go gets this. Now take note, the Janissaries will still have the under-reliance of Janissaries modifier that gives 40% loyalty reduction. So that's a huge amount, boys. That's easy to fix though. Just hire as many Janissaries as you possibly can. So now that we hired a few of those boys, we don't have the under-reliance anymore, and our loyalty equilibrium boosted up to 78%. The dimmies are basically very standard as always. You can get 100 extra governing capacity from the dimmies, so you would essentially get 400 governing capacity from all four of the estates here. Some of the highlights of the privileges I recommend you give out are the noble dhimmi lords, which give 1 extra to leaders without upkeep. However, this can be cancelled once you have high enough land force limit, because land force limit dictates the amount of generals that you can have. I think it's like 100 land force limit is 1 general or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So this particular privilege is good early on, but can be cancelled along the way. Tolerance of heathens +2 is also pretty good. It essentially means 2 minus unrest in heathen provinces. Again, dhimmi self-governance costs 5% crownlands, and it's totally not worth it. You get lowered unrest in heathen provinces based on the amount of crownlands that the dhimmi have, so truly not worth it, like the privilege with the burghers that I mentioned before. Dhimmi liberties can be okay, of course. Alternatively, you can give out the promote dhimmi education. It's the same privilege that you have with the ulema, the clerical education, but you cannot give it if you gave out the clerical education. So you have to choose one or the other. Essentially, give it for the estate that you know you will have more slots available as. You can get another leader without upkeep from giving this privilege. It also enables the decision to promote dhimmi nobles, which costs 15 loyalty with the church and the nobility, but it gives dhimmis 20% loyalty. That being said, you don't need to click that decision, and you still have 1 more leaders available for free. Added with 1.35, the protect dhimmi communities is 100% worth it, since it increases your religious unity by 33%. And that's pretty much it with the dhimmis. Nothing else changed. Ming, on the other hand, has also received a new estate, the eunuchs, or as I like to call them, the EU4 players represented in game. It's a joke. It's a joke, okay? Come on. Please don't cancel me. Ironic that the eunuchs get liberty desire reduction over here, isn't it, boys? So the eunuchs are very unique because they're eunuchs, so it starts with EU, so they're unique. No, that's not why. They're unique because of the privileges that they give out here. They start with the delegate subject diplomacy, which is honestly a little bit of a debuff. You get a ton of corruption from that. So you kind of want to get rid of that one, honestly, because that's going to cost you a ton of freaking money to get rid of. Look at that. We're losing 8.7 ducats to root out corruption caused by that particular privilege. For that matter, all of the privileges that the eunuchs have cost corruption. You can get massive bonuses, like here you get 14% governing capacity modifier increase, advisor cost reduction as well, but again, corruption 0.19, minimum autonomy in your province is -5, as well as influence reduction, and even dev cost reduction -8.8, but again, corruption 0.19, flat out governing capacity +100 and minimum autonomy -5. So here's the thing, right? This eunuch land rights is actually really good. However, because we start with 59% eunuchs crownlands distribution, this privilege and most of the other privileges are actually horrible. To put this into perspective, I've taken away all of the eunuch crownland distribution, so now you can see without them having any crownlands what it looks like. The delegate subject diplomacy does not give any sort of benefit. It essentially only gives influence and loyalty equilibrium, so it's useless taking up a slot there. Supremacy over the emperor is essentially supremacy over the crown, and it still gives yearly corruption 0.10%. Establish a favor system, again, still gives 0.05 corruption, but it allows you to change national focus 5 years faster, as well as it gives more favors and power projection from insults. Allow personal fortunes gives 0. It gives nothing because it's based off of the amount of crownlands that the eunuchs have. Same thing goes for the single whip law. It gives nothing. It just gives you corruption. That's it. But then we do have some good stuff. Minimum autonomy here from delegate provincial administration is worth it. Possible advisors, sure, why not? Again, minimum autonomy army and governing capacity plus 100 is worth it, and it costs 5% crownlands. Prominent balanced bureaucracy could be worth it for the advisor cost, but you will have most likely enough advisor cost reduction modifiers to make it not so much worth it anymore. Truth is, the eunuchs are basically a debuff at the start of the campaign as Ming, and you got to keep them in check best way you can. The Shizu, the Qinhuang, and the Shambang are exactly the same as the European estates, so we're not going to go through that anymore. There's nothing changed over there, but we do have some significant changes when it comes to the Indian estates. As you probably know, they too have 5 different privileges, or sorry, 5 different estates. The Brahmins, the Ulema is essentially almost identical to the clergy, so we're not going to talk about this one at all really because it's pretty much identical. Amirs, again, it's identical to the nobles. Jains are different and unique to the Indians. Take note, a lot of the times you can give out the +1 mana privilege with different estates, so you can say give it out with the Marathas, but you can also give out with the Amirs. So you can choose. You can either give it with the Marathas and take up 1 slot there, or give it with the Amirs and take up 1 slot here. It really is based off of which one you need more slots with. Brahmins, for example, can give out religious unity and tolerance of heathens, 100% worth it, especially if you're playing in India. All 5 of the estates can give you the 100 extra governing capacity, so you essentially can get 500 governing capacity by giving this out to all 5 of the estates. You probably noticed this is new as well. The Brahmin education is exactly the same as the clergy education. Again, you can give it for the Brahmins or you can give it for the clergy, but you cannot give it for both of them at the same time. Ergo, you got to choose one of these to give it to. Some new decisions here as well, such as the Sikh Brahmin education allows you to get 20% more religious unity, or sorry, Brahmin legitimacy, as well as 1 more unrest for heathens. For the Jains, on the other hand, you get the development cost reduction and state maintenance reduction, which is a huge amount, both economically and from a development perspective, of course. They also are the ones that will give you the 1% burgher loans like the burghers give for the Europeans, and also the ones that give the economic freedom like the burghers do. One more interesting privilege is the promote Jains bookkeeping, which if you have 100 loyalty, it can give up to 0.5 interest per annum reduction, state maintenance minus 25%, and inflation reduction and reduced inflation costs minus 50%. So whenever you do use this interaction, it will cost you significantly less. It's only 15% cheaper now because of the loyalty that our Jains have. We also have the Rajputs and the Vaishyas for the Hindu Indian nations. The differences here are, for example, the Vaishyas can give you monthly war exhaustion and war tax cost minus 50% flat, and we have the same privilege that we had with the Europeans, but this one only gives 2.5 construction cost reduction rather than 5% construction cost reduction for some reason. The Rajput privilege allows you to establish the Rajput regiments, which are a unique Indian unit that is actually quite good, and all the other privileges are pretty much the same. Also want to talk about the most famous of privilege, if you guys watch my videos by now, of course, the Strong Duchies. Now, the Strong Duchies gives you 2 extra diplo relations and lowers the liberty desire in subjects by 10%. Take note, you can only give this out if you have 2 vassals, not personal unions. They have to be vassals or vassal type of subjects, and it helps massively with getting those extra diplo relations as well as keeping your vassals in check. So it is worth giving this out for the nobility or the amirs or whatever you want to call it. There is another privilege that works in tandem with this, the amir integration policy. It increases the liberty desire of your subjects, but it makes it so it's faster to integrate them by 5%, as well as it doesn't give you the -3 diplo rep hit once you integrate vassals. So you essentially can integrate vassals continuously without having to wait for 10 years for that diplo rep to go down. I strongly encourage you guys to give these 2 privileges out whenever you have vassals, of course. Last but not least, we're going to talk about the Cossacks. The Cossacks are available to Orthodox nations that have steppe provinces. Well, actually, not Orthodox nations. It has to be Eastern tech nations that have steppe provinces. So that's predominantly Muscovy, Lithuania, Moldova, all these bad boys here. It allows you to establish the Cossack regiments, which are unique units. So if we recruit the Cossacks here, we can get both Cossack infantry and Cossack cavalry, and they offer 15% shock damage increase. There's other good privileges that the Cossacks offer us, such as the development cost reduction in all steppe provinces, as well as now it gives out a conquistador with 40 tradition if we enable the decision here. So we go over to our decisions, Cossacks exploration expedition. As long as we have 50% Cossack loyalty, we can get a free conquistador to explore the steppes, or the eastern steppes better yet. Cossacks Cossack self-governance is not bad, but there's other privileges we want to give out, such as the Cossack leaders that offers leader shock and army tradition. Manpower from steppe provinces from primal herding rights is huge, but it lowers the tax income, so keep that in mind. For the mid to late game, it's irrelevant tax income, so you might as well give this out. Another privilege that helps out with the developing steppe provinces is freedom of the steppes. Take note, it does offer 5% dev cost reduction for steppe provinces, but increases the minimum autonomy, so keep that in mind. It might not be worth it. Legalize the Cossack raids offers looting speed, plus it offers you this unique decision here that gives you 15 army tradition. That is insane. That's actually massive. And now we already are at 5 out of 6, so after we expand the Cossacks, we are at 6 out of 6. That's pretty much it with the Cossacks, and we can have up to 11 Cossacks. I think it's like 40% of our land force limit or something. Also, I'm gonna do a brief overview of the tribes. The tribes are fairly easy. You give out the governing capacity, guaranteed leadership of the host whenever you get the army tradition for the general cost and army tradition DK, larger tribal hosts to get the extra manpower, autonomy of the tribes, of course, because you get the extra religious unity, so it's pretty much worth it. We do have a few new interactions that translate into decisions, similar like the newly ones added into the west and into the Indian parts. From these, I'd recommend this one here. The tribal military service is pretty good, since it can give you a general with 40 tradition as well as 5 free cavalry units, but it requires that you have 50% loyalty with the tribe, so keep that in mind. And probably the best newly added privilege for the hordes is the secured succession, where the tribal succession crisis no longer fires for heirs which have at least 12 monarch points in total, as well as it offers you another decision to support the tribes that gives 10 loyalty for the tribes. So now if we do seller titles as well, we can do the other decision here that it gives us the maintenance modifier, or we could have just gotten the general. One last thing I want to address is the question of when do you cancel privileges. If you want to get absolutism, then you should cancel privileges before you reach absolutism, and you should only keep the basic privileges, the +1 mana privileges, and maybe even the governing capacity if you needed. However, if you're not going for a world conquest, you do not need absolutism, and keeping the privileges will help you out 1,000 times more, getting a strong economy, making a super good nation. So remember, only cancel privileges if you're planning on doing a world conquest, otherwise it's literally pointless. I'd say this is a pretty good overview of the estates in 1.35 and the domination DLC that came alongside it, but there's definitely a lot of situational stuff, so I strongly recommend you guys check out my specific videos for each individual country, because I have a lot of them, and I will be covering all countries in 1.35. You'll have a link to that playlist in the description if you're interested. Plus, don't forget to leave those likes. If we get the like target, then we'll do that army composition guide. And if you enjoy the content, consider subscribing. I'm trying to get to 170,000 by the end of April, which is fast approaching. And hey, until the next time, check out this awesome Ottoman video. And I want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons, channel members, and Twitch subscribers. I would not be able to do this without all your support.